Grow CFO is where finance leaders grow together. Join thousands of like-minded professionals using Grow CFO to access the combined knowledge and experience of the finance leader community. You can join us today, growcfo.net. Hello, and welcome to the Grow CFO Show. I'm your host, Kevin Appleby, and this week I've got the CEO of the CFO Centre, Sara with me. Welcome to the podcast, Sara.
Thanks very much for having me. Great to be here.
Sara, CEO of the CFO Centre. Now, there's obviously a journey before that. Tell me a bit about you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm a qualified chartered accountant after university with Deloitte, corporate finance, went into industry with L'Oreal. And actually, it was when I went there that I realized there was actually more to life than finance, dare I say. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
Of course, you're allowed to say that.
And I looked up from a spreadsheet at that point and thought, actually, I need to know a lot more around business just generally. So I did an MBA at London Business School. And it was actually when I was coming out of doing that for a couple of years full time that actually the businesses that wanted to recruit me were the investment banks because I was a CA with an MBA, perfect for them. And actually, I didn't want to go back into corporate. I felt there was more to life than the corporate world. I wanted a bit more of a personal experience, a human experience. And by that time, I'd got married and I was starting a family. And for the life of me, I couldn't think how I was going to have a fulfilling career and be mum. And that was the start. Big challenge. And that was 20 odd years ago. So things may have changed. But back then, I couldn't see it.
Changed that much, unfortunately, Sara. I'm seeing the same challenge now with daughter and daughter-in-law.
Yeah.
So family and a career.
Yes. At that time, I thought, gosh, what am I going to do? And there was this concept that was just a seed out there in the market called part-time FD. And I thought, I can do that. I can be a part-time FD. I can work a couple of days a week for entrepreneurial businesses who don't want, and can't afford a full-time CFO, but need the skill set nonetheless to grow their business. Then for the other couple of days a week, I can be mum and bring up my family, and that would be a perfect match. So I set myself up and started looking around for others that might want to do that as well, or were already doing it. And I found Colin Mills, who'd previously set up the FD Centre. And he was doing the same thing. So he wanted freedom from corporate life. And again, had seen that gap in the market and already got going with some clients. So I joined up and was part of the FD Centre, which we've grown, this is back in the early 2000s, which we've grown over the years. A national business in the UK, then an international business. I think we're now in 17 countries globally and enjoying every moment. The concept is it travels, it's completely taken off, and it's perfect for those growing businesses that need that skill set on an ongoing basis, but don't need it full time.
Exactly. And I've spoken now through Grow CFO to so many fractional CFOs who are really enjoying working in the space and love the idea of either having one client and a lot of freedom or having multiple clients and lots of different challenges going on. So I think you can mold it whichever way you want to go.
You can. Well, the flexibility, I think, is key. That's what a lot of individuals are looking for that they're not getting in corporate. And I do agree with you. I still think that's a challenge in corporate. And the flexibility might be, as you've said, have 1 or 2 or 3 days a week to do something that, else in your life that really matters to you, or alongside the client work. Or it could also be working with businesses 5 days a week and going flat out, but doing it in a flexible way. So if you need to be somewhere on a Wednesday afternoon to watch a kid's football match or look after an elderly parent, you can absolutely do that. You know that you'll make the time up another time, and that's totally okay. So it's flexibility at many levels, and it really works, and you can design your life around it. And as long as you're delivering great value to the businesses you work with, it works really well.
Yeah. And it expands well beyond the CFO. You can use the same concept, I think, right across the C-suite.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So as part of the Liberty Group, which is our parent company, we have the sort of CXO, if you like, fractional CFO across marketing and sales and people as well as finance. And it can go to tech and other disciplines. So the full C-suite is possible to work with on this basis in a fractional way.
I think that's rather useful as well. Even if you're a full-time CFO in a smaller company, I think you often end up picking up lots of jobs that are around the place that nobody else wants to do in a way, or that you just don't have enough of to have a full-time resource. Many CFOs that I know are also in charge of IT.
Yes, there's a
Right.
couple of ways you can go with it. So you're absolutely right. I've heard that many times from individuals out there in the fractional world. They end up, because they're there full time, but perhaps the role isn't full time, they end up picking up everything else that perhaps in the back office or in operations across other disciplines, which some enjoy and say maybe some don't so much. But that means you haven't really got the specialist working in that area. So the other way to do it is to go fractional and make sure you've got then the right CXO operating across each area of the business. Then you've got the right skill set, the right time for the right piece of work. Another way fractional can work is with bigger businesses as well. So what I'm seeing is that group CFOs or group CXOs, but let's take the CFO, given we're in growth CFO territory, group CFOs. How many times do I sit next to them and they tell me, I wish there was another one of me? I know there's a problem in my subsidiary over there. I just haven't got time to get to it. My shopping list of things to do is enormous. And there are some critical things that the group CFO needs to do. And there are some things that they really need done for them. They don't want to bring in someone that they have to train up. They don't want to do too much oversight. So a fractional CFO being a specialist in a certain area around systems or treasury or acquisition can sit alongside, get the job done, bring it back done, not need too much oversight. And I think the most important thing is be non-threatening. Fractional CFOs don't want the group CFO job. That's what they've left behind. But they're very much there to help and make the group CFO look good. So I think that's another area where I can see fractional really working in the future.
Certainly across a consultancy career, often working for the CFO or the finance director. It was public sector, so the title CFO often didn't exist, though the role was there. Always what you're trying to do was make that sponsoring client look famous.
Absolutely.
Always trying to make the finance director or the director of resources look as though they'd done a really good job. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think today's world is, we all know how challenging it is. And the expectations from corporate are huge, I think, for individuals. And the CFO is expected to go play a much more integral role in the whole growth of the business, be number two to the CEO and be 24/7 across everything with technology at your fingertips. And quite frankly, that's a superhuman ask, I think.
Oh,
So
it is.
by having a bit of a secret power of fractional CFOs to help could well be part of the answer. And the beauty of it is that in the past, that would be interims, because our mental model in the past has always been a full-time mental model. Now
Yes.
the mental model is fractional and part-time and sharing CFOs, if you like. So therefore, we know projects don't fit neatly into full-time boxes. They have a build-up, they might have a peak, they have a drop-down, a waning off.
Yes.
So this way, you can match the workload to the talent that can deliver it perfectly if you do it this way. So it's a very flexible and fit-for-purpose approach.
Yeah. And Grow CFO, we've got the CFO competency framework. And it talks about 9 competencies, 5 skills in each. So 45 skills altogether. And yeah, you can take it, you can find your strengths and weaknesses. But the challenge to master all 45 skills is, now it's almost impossible to make that happen.
Yeah.
So you've got to recognize you need help all over the place. And then take on top of that, that's just skills. Take on top of that deep knowledge about other specialisms such as IT, property management. Maybe you've got a legal role. Maybe you've got an HR role. Now, putting those together, asking one individual to possess all of those skills is never going to happen.
No, it's not. And also that's not what individuals want either. So what my experience is that corporate CFOs, as we said earlier, or CFOs permanent in roles, sometimes get dragged into areas that, yes, needs doing, but isn't their specialist, and perhaps they don't enjoy. And so by being fractional, there's an ability to operate more in your swim lane as
Yes.
a CFO. So really hone in on the areas that you know you're really good at and you really love, and therefore you're going to deliver your best value, and take those roles across businesses and work across a number of businesses rather than just being in one place and then let others take the roles that are their specialisms. And there's a bit of coordination there, but that's where I see the beauty of it, is you do more of what you love and what you're good at in the fractional world.
Yeah, I recorded a few weeks ago a podcast with Lucia Knight, and we were talking about happiness in your finance career. And she was talking about not just focusing in on the areas you like, but understanding what your superpowers are, focusing on how to use those. And I think that's just vitally important in this space. What are my superpowers? How can I best apply them?
Yes. And I like to think of that in terms of athletes, actually, elite athletes. Elite athletes are brought into teams, or they're doing the sport they do because they've got a superpower. They are super good at one particular thing. And what athletes tend to do is they don't try and be good at all the things that they're mediocre at and try and build those up. They tend to just manage those areas, but they really double down on the superpower. And I think that's a great way of analogy, really, of making sure that we've got people in the business doing the things they're really good at and they really love, and then find others to do the other bits and not get stressed or worry about making sure that we're good at everything, because that's just not human.
No, work on your strengths and you can become a real expert in that area.
Yeah. Mastery.
Work on mastery. Absolutely. Work on your weaknesses. And generally the best you could hope to would be go from bad to mediocre.
Exactly.
Yeah. But Sara, you've written a book, Strategy and Leadership as a Service, to how the access economy meets the C-suite. Great. In charge of the CFO Centre. But why write a book?
Yes, good question. Well, I decided to write this book because at the CFO Centre, we knew what we did and we knew how we did it, but we hadn't really bottomed out why it worked at an academic level, if you like. So where did the practice meet the theory? And I'm a learner. I love bringing the theory to the commercial world and sitting with one foot in both camps to learn both ways. So I did a master's degree with Oxford University and HEC in Paris. Actually, it ended up being during COVID. It wasn't meant to be, obviously, but like others, that's where it ended up. And I did my dissertation to look at the academic concepts that might be underpinning our business. And then from there, totally absorbed in it and put that together as part of my dissertation, and then took it on with Routledge to put that into a book for others to learn from and to share the concept, because I feel that the fractional world, and I've coined it as the C-suite access economy. So what I'm saying here is we're moving positions from the payroll to an access role. So we're not owning or employing these people in the businesses. We are accessing their services, which makes it flexible and fit for purpose, if you like, and could be crafted around the tasks and work required. However, there's a bit of a mindset shift here because we're used to employing people. And so suddenly, if we're not employing them, what does that mean? And what I found is that the access economy, we already use it. Many of us, I'm sure many of you listening in today, will already be using many businesses in the access economy. I'm talking Netflix, I'm talking Airbnb, I'm talking Spotify. So all these models out there are doing incredibly well. And they're models where we access the goods and services. We access our music on Spotify instead of having them lined up on our shelves at home with CDs. We log on, we scroll down, and we curate our music. And it feels like it still belongs to us, even though we absolutely know that we're accessing the services. The beauty is we can access far more music through Spotify than we can ever hope to buy in CD form, even if you can buy CDs anymore. I think you can. But
I'm just looking to my left here, and I'm looking at a whole shelf full of CDs, and it suddenly occurs to me I don't actually have a machine in the house anymore that'll play them.
Exactly. So we have moved on, and these access models are really taking off and becoming acceptable. And the key thing, though, is, and what I found through my research was, yes, the services of fractional CXOs is part of the access economy. But what I found was that to really make this access economy work, and the business models that do it well have this baked into them, is something called psychological ownership. Because we like to feel we own things as humans. Our possessions are really quite important to us, mainly because it says something about us as individuals. They communicate to the outside world something about us. So we're quite particular about what we own. So in order for the C-suite access economy to work, it still needs to feel like we employ these people, even though we don't have that employment contract. We still have a relationship that's as strong or stronger than anything when you would employ. And if you can bake psychological ownership into the model, then what I found through my research is that using a fractional CXO, a fractional CFO in this conversation, it can go on for a long time because it feels like employment, even though we're not actually employing the individuals.
Yeah. Now, I wonder, in the eyes of HMRC or IRS, if you're in the United States, whether they'd see that fractional employment necessarily in the same way. Now, if you're a fractional CFO and you've decided, oh, I no longer want to do 5 days a week. I've got 3 clients at the moment. I want to reduce this down to 1 client and only 2 days a week. Am I still a fractional CFO or am I a disguised employee?
I think it really depends on the way the role is done. So the psychological ownership piece is a feelings piece, and it's about the relationship that both parties in the relationship feel. In terms of, I guess, the legislation that sits alongside that, my understanding of that is that the fractional CXO, if you like, still has control of how they do their work. They have control of when they do their work and how often they show up in the business. They use their own tools. They may have right of substitution, or there's a direction of travel. They're delivering an output to the business owner and giving them a feeling of a strong relationship that feels trusted, yet the control with how the role is done very much sits with the fractional CXO, because they're bringing expertise to that business that business can only get through that way. So I think that's the distinction between the two ways of looking at it in terms of employment and self-employment.
Yeah. You could go to the extreme as a business where you've only got the CEO and everybody else is fractional.
And I know of businesses like that.
Yeah.
So they're not many, but I do know of some businesses that do that, who have so bought into the model that you don't necessarily need an employment contract to have highly committed individuals that are going to deliver for you how you want to, and have a very lean and agile business that you can actually operate your whole business on that model. And I do know some consulting businesses, actually some people businesses that do that.
The last 10 years of my consulting career, I worked as an independent, almost always for the same organization. And they had a very small number of permanent people, and nearly everybody was what they would refer to as an associate.
Yes.
Freelancers that were on board to do the project. And that project might be full-time for a number of months, or might be part-time for a number of months.
Yes. And I think, so if we talk future of work, Charles Handy wrote back in the 80s and 90s about this, about the portfolio approach to life, and how in the future we may well move to organizations that are organizers, not employers. And maybe we have a core of permanent employed individuals and then have various rings around the outside of freelancers, contractors, fractional C-suite, and other workers that serve different purposes. So you have a very mobile and agile wider workforce. And I actually think we are starting to see this to come to fruition now. Some businesses have various contractors that they work with to do specialized work. Then you have, obviously, the fractional C-suite that's growing as an industry. And I feel that the world of work is moving this way because of the external environment and the pace of change of technology transformation, and then the external megatrends, if you like, that are pivoting us, making us pivot from certain positions to new positions very quickly. So I feel that's the way that we could have an organization that can adapt very quickly to changes in the world. It does mean that we have to embrace this concept of having a wider workforce than our core employees, which brings challenges around how to manage these different levels or types of individuals, and realize that we need to build a culture that embraces all of them, not just our inner circle.
Now, that's always one that fascinates me, Sarah. How do you build culture? Culture is really important in an organization. It's baked in, it goes hand in hand with values and strategy.
Yes.
So when you've got a lot of fractional people in your organization, how do you do that culture piece? How do you make that happen?
Yes, for me, this is about being inclusive and believing that these fractional individuals are part of our wider workforce and team, our wider team, and including them in the way we do things around here. I think that's hugely important. So not setting up artificial barriers between the two, because I think if we see ourselves as one team, albeit in different forms of relationship, then we can become, the interactions between us can become more seamless and more productive for the whole organization, and we can be pulling in the same direction. So I think you're blurring those lines between how we communicate, how we interact. So this goes back to the psychological ownership piece around, there are 4 things that really make this work. One is around control. And what I mean about control is around being accessible, available, and approachable for each other. So the parties in the relationship need to, just as you would for your internal core team, is make yourself available for your fractional workforce, and vice versa. The fractional workforce need to make themselves totally available and on tap for the business they work with. Psychological safety is hugely important. So has the business got some culture of building psychologically safe teams so that we can have healthy debates? Doing things together, co-creation is very important. Just as we would co-create with our internal employee team, we co-create with our fractional team. And lastly, it's around intimacy. So hanging out, being prepared to not just, I would encourage fractional individuals not to go in, just do the work and leave, but go in and hang out, be with the business, care about the business, be on the WhatsApp group, understand what the culture is, do the fantasy football league, whatever it is, be part of the organization.
Yeah. And that hanging out piece is difficult these days in a remote world.
Yeah. It's actually difficult for the employees.
Let alone
if you're
fractional.
remote. Yeah. And I think it's deliberate. So we built a remote organization from the get-go back in the 2000s. We've always been remote as a business ourselves. And the way we found, and I'm sure there are lots of ways to do it, the way that worked for us was to obviously acknowledge the fact that we were remote and virtual, but be very deliberate about when we were going to get together, what we were going to do, and how often. So that time was sacred, it was valuable, and we made sure we used it to the fullest, and we made it regular. And that's served brilliantly for us over the years. And actually, I think you can have organizations where we do go into an office and we sit and look at our screens all day and don't interact. So it works both ways.
Yeah, one organization I was talking to had very definitely the rule that said these are the certain days that we come into the office, we sit down as a team, we plan what we're going to do, we discuss the issues, and we put something together that we then all go away to execute. Don't bother bringing your laptop in that day. You don't need it. Yeah. If you're sitting at a desk, just working by yourself, staring at the screen, well, why are you here? You could be at home doing that.
Yeah, I think, and it is a complex problem. I don't want to simplify it in any way, shape or form. I think remote and hybrid working is different for different levels of individuals, different roles, and different activities within roles. And I think as a rule, a lot of organizations are doing a 2-3 day hybrid mix. I think that's quite a simple solution for a complex problem. I think there's more to it than that.
There's a lot more to it than that, yes. And I think especially when you've got junior people in the team, one of the things that I've never got my head around is how do you give the most junior person in the team who's probably learning on the job the right amount of supervision when everybody's in a hybrid model? My way back in the office, you'd be kind of just a corner of your eye looking to make sure they seemed all right. As soon as you detected they might have a problem, you go and have a chat. Now, that doesn't happen when you're remote. The problem simmers. You're waiting and waiting for that person to reach out. And there can also be an issue. You pick up the phone and say, how's it going? And they're automatically defensive. They don't want to show any weakness. They don't want to show that they're struggling. So they tell you it's all right when it's not.
I think that having a friend at work, buddying up, I think is a good way to make sure someone's checking in. The mentoring aspect, I think mentoring's huge going forward for many reasons. The remote working, one of them, or hybrid, making sure that there's deliberate mentoring going on and there's valuable in-person time, as well as time when people do their solo activities for their roles at home when they need peace and quiet. I think, but having a mentor, I think also in the generational divide is really important. So I have a lot of requests from individuals who want to become a CFO, how to do that. And I would always say is find yourself a mentor, someone who you get on with, obviously, and who's in that role. It doesn't have to be in your organization, could be outside of it. But find yourself a mentor to help mentor you through those roles in the first place, and then your first roles and your junior FD roles, and then going into the CFO role.
Yeah. Now, in a bigger organization with full-time C-suite, you'd often find those C-suite people acting as mentors to other folk. Do you think that's a model that can work in the fractional world? Do you have time to do that mentoring piece?
Well, we do a lot of mentoring within our organization for businesses who have identified someone in their organization who's in a more junior role in finance and wants to progress into the CFO role. So it could be that we are the fractional CFO of that business and mentor at the same time, or we could be the sort of safety net in the background, but basically really training and mentoring that individual to become that CFO of the future for that organization. And again, it's about making them the best that they possibly can be and really realize their potential, whilst at the same time acting as a little bit of a safety net for the organization for the things that they haven't yet developed the skills to solve fully, so that the organization is the risks managed, if you like. So yes, I think that's a role that fractional C-suite individuals can do for organizations.
Brilliant. So the book, Sarah, really underpins everything that we've been talking about with a lot of research.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's fully researched. I think there's more to do, quite frankly, would you believe it, around really understanding how this relationship works in the absence of employment for the long term. Because I feel if in the future of work, we are moving towards jobs fragmenting or roles fragmenting, if you like, into jobs and work, that means that businesses get a very agile solution because they get the right skill set at the right time, but you still need that trusted relationship to go alongside for the long term. So I feel there's still more to do about that, but the book underpins how this C-suite access economy works, how I know, as much as I know to date, around how and why this business model works.
Have you done any research into age and the fractional? Like, I see fractional working a lot of the time where you've got somebody who's effectively retired from corporate and has 2 or 3 clients as a fractional, but not working full time. And they're going on beyond normal retirement age, doing that sort of thing. Do you think that's a serious model for the future?
Yes. So age is a really interesting dimension to look at fractional through. So you're absolutely right. I think fractional means we're all living longer, hopefully.
Yes.
The 100-year life is on the table. So I feel that the old model of retiring at 60, 65 is too early. And probably we want to keep active. We want to keep our brains working. We've got more to give past that age. So I feel the fractional model can work really well around going way past that usual retirement age into 70s and on. And the grey hairs and the wisdom and the knowledge that those individuals have achieved and got under their belt for that age, you'd absolutely want those sorts of people sat next to you when you're going, as a business owner, when you're going through those issues. So I feel it's a way to wind down and not shut up shop on one day like you would in corporate and just suddenly not work anymore. So it's a brilliant way to have more time and space and ease into retirement while still adding value to businesses in a very valid way. That said, on the other end of the age scale, I see individuals entering the fractional world at a much younger age because it's becoming more accepted as an industry. You can make a living from it very well. And some people just don't want to carry on with the corporate career. They want the variety. They want to work with entrepreneurs. They want the flexibility. And this is a way of doing that at a much younger age. So in your 40s and early 40s, rather than when you're near retirement age. And that said, I think the next phase is actually the Gen Z of this world. I think they're already gigging, quite frankly. They've already got portfolios. It may not be in a certain discipline, but it may be a range of activities and roles they do. I think they're going to be they are much more open to having a portfolio all the way through their lives. Now, I think the dilemma then is, how do they get trained up? Because the old model, or the current model, shall I say, is go into corporate, earn your stripes, and then come out the other side and go fractional at some point when you've got that under your belt. So organizations like yours helping individuals get the skills earlier means that they can probably go fractional earlier. And the mentoring from organizations like ours could also help with that.
I think there's a gap there that we've got to address. Corporates have learning and development teams that make sure people do the right courses, have the right training assigned to them. You're out as a fractional and you're very much on your own. And one of the first things that can easily drop is learning and development, because unless you've got a really immediate need to find out about something, you possibly don't think about it too much.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really interesting. I see actually a little bit of a paradox around this, in that Gen Z, many that I have spoken to, see employment as the route to fractional. Like, they'll do employment just as long as they need to in order to get to fractional, because that's where they really want to be. And then I see businesses still a little bit in that mindset where they see fractional as the route to employment. I'll have someone fractional until I can afford to employ. Whereas actually, I think even when the business case perhaps doesn't support it, perhaps when, like we talked about earlier on in this conversation, where you said you've got a full-time CFO working with an SME and they're picking up loads of other activities that isn't in their swim lane. Well, actually, that business shouldn't go employed with a full-time individual at that point. They should stay with fractional and use other fractional people to do this, the roles that are their specialisms. And I think we've still got that mindset shift to move with businesses, that you can still have a team. They can be highly committed and your team, and they can be fractional.
Yeah. You mentioned the gig economy, the access economy. Is there a difference?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I do mention the gig economy. I guess I'm referring to probably the Uber world that we're all used to and probably grown up first. The access economy, I think, is the umbrella term that it would encompass probably organizations like mine around the more privileged end, if you like, of the access economy. So the gig economy, where you've got individuals doing deliveries and things like that, some people definitely choose to be in that world, but some are forced there through necessity. And the gig economy tends to have a little bit of a negative association to it, which we probably all understand, through people want more security from working that way. And I totally buy into that. I guess I distinguish the fractional world is the professional knowledge workers who are working in the access economy have chosen deliberately to be in this space. They absolutely want to be self-employed and adopt there are risks and downsides, and they want to adopt those. They understand that goes with the territory.
Sarah, that has been such a fascinating conversation. I know we could go on talking about this for hours, but I'm looking at the clock and realizing we've got to draw this to a close. Sarah, just wishing you all the best with the book.
Thanks very much.
Certainly a load of good meat in that book. This is by no means a bedtime read. There's some real solid stuff in there that if you really want to get into it and understand more about the access economy in the C-suite, this is definitely the reading for you. Must have taken a lot of hours to put that together. Impressive work, Sarah.
Yeah, it wasn't a swift process. It did take a good while, but I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Sarah, thank you for being this week's guest on the Grow CFO Show.
Thanks for having me.